highwayman, if there was one, was a fool if he thought he could force Jed Lambert to part with his money. Jed was a hard man, used to striking out with his fists. The other men on the drove were afraid of him, but they followed his lead, caring little about their cattle and less about the women who walked the drovers' roads behind them. The roadway was opening out now and sloped up to the top of the hill. This was where the highwayman would attack. Jessie looked up a little nervously, but there was no sign of a rider on the hill. She took out her knitting and stared at the tangle of wool. She'd never been any good at it, and despite what Flora had said, she was little better at weeding, both tasks expected of a woman on a drove. She heard a sharp cry, and then the sound of hoofs beating a tattoo against the land. "He's coming," Jed cried, "but I'm ready for him." He guided his horse to Jessie's side. "Here, Jessie, take him the bag and leave the rest to us." "Why me?" The bag was heavy, and Jessie clutched it in horror. "Why can't one of the men go?" "Just do as you're told," Jed said harshly, "and leave the rest to us. Keep him talking a bit." Jessie lifted her skirts and made her way unsteadily to the highwayman, who gazed down at her. He had wide shoulders, and his face was half hidden by a scarf. His eyes, though, were kind as they rested on her. "Sent a woman to do a man's job, eh? Shows what weaklings they are." "I don't mind." Jessie searched frantically for a few words to keep him with her. She had no idea what Jed was planning, but she knew it would be something horrible. "Look, take the gold and get away," she said urgently. "Jed Lambert is a cruel man, and he'll have no mercy on you." Then she saw that one of the drovers was behind the cattle with a catapult in his hand. He would have lead bullets in his pocket, and he knew how to use them to kill man or animal. She opened her mouth to shout a warning, but she was too late. The highwayman leaned over to take the bag, and a bullet grazed his ear. The next came from a different direction and caught him in the neck. Jessie screamed and dropped the bag, whose contents spilled out on the ground. It had contained not gold, but bits of metallic ores. The highwayman looked at her with blank eyes, then fell slowly from the saddle to land with a thud on the dry earth. Jed came up beside her. "That'll teach the bastard to rob an honest man," he shouted. One of the drovers came out into the open and picked up the highwayman's pistol. Slowly, he began to undress him. Jessie watched him, sickened, as he put on the dead man's clothes. Jed shrugged and took the highwayman's horse by the reins. "Come on, men! Let's get on with it," he called. "We've a long road to cover before nightfall. You," he pointed to Jessie, "pick up the bag and the metal. We might need them again." Jessie did as she was told. It didn't do to provoke Jed into one of his rages. A few minutes later, she was back with the other women and cast a glance to the dead man lying on the ground with nothing to cover his nakedness. She took off her shawl and, averting her eyes, spread it over the body and said a prayer for the poor man's soul. Then she picked up her pace. Soon she would be in London, and Jed Lambert would be nothing but a bad memory. Chapter 2. Manon Jones sat in the plush drawing-room of the big house and stared listlessly through the window. The garden was washed with sunshine, and the light and shade through the trees threw soft patterns on the terrace. Beyond lay rolling fields and leafy trees. Broadoaks was one of the finest houses in the county, but she was shut inside the walls, feeling like a prisoner. She heard her son's faint cry from upstairs and started to her feet, only to sink back into her chair again, knowing that the efficient nurse employed by George Jones would be tending to the baby's needs. Mr. Jones managed everything as he managed his business, leaving little room for the wishes of others, especially the daughter-in-law he did not approve of. Non had arrived at Broadoaks as an unmarried woman with a bastard child.